What have you learned so far? What do you know about it? Let's go that route, okay?
Can I move this bench?
You can move it wherever you need to. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've interviewed first Mrs. Faranack,
Okay.
right? Second, Mr. Trachomey, Mr. Zagrashik yesterday. And from the perspective of Mrs. Faranack and Mr. Zagrashik, and Mr. Rezebek, I apologize, they don't seem to have much of a problem at the moment with the funding.
Yeah.
Now, like, there are...
Those are also, they have very strong booster clubs, those two programs.
Right.
Yeah.
But Mr. Zakrashik also said that he pays for a lot of food out of his own pocket for, like, after weigh-ins for wrestling and stuff like that. And then he said that, like, because he coaches football, wrestling, and track.
Yes, I don't think he's going to keep doing that. That's a rough year. That's a long year.
But he said, like, they're funded, he explained to us how, like, he believes that they're funded differently, they're funded the way they should be, because, like, football's a lot more expensive than track to outfit a player and stuff like that. And so, but the conversations with the students in our class, which we're technically not allowed to use because it's like our class, they believe, so the students themselves believe that there's not equity amongst the sports based off of like what they have to do compared to when they're in other sports. And so that's why
What do you mean by that?
like they're not treated equally. I didn't mean to say equity. So like
That's the same word though. It's okay, but what do you mean in terms of? So what? Give me an example, I guess.
so Matt Hooper believes that
He plays baseball.
Yeah,
Okay.
he believes that the fact that he says, I'm not 100% on this is his wording.
Yeah, so fine.
They have to pay for their baseball pants. They have to. They don't have a choice on that. But like other sports, like wrestling, for instance, they don't have to pay for a uniform.
Sure, no, but why do they have to pay for the baseball pants?
I'm not sure.
I mean, now there's one where like the Booster Club is not nearly as ingrained and productive as like football and band and wrestling. They have large financial support from, which has nothing to do with the school's end. Is they're they've built up these booster programs and have a strong, and then every community is different too. So like things that are traditionally very important in Allen are wrestling and band. Football, it is, but not quite to the extent of what it is. I mean, a lot of places
Over
it's
the
like
alumni.
football,
Right.
And then everything else, and that's
Like,
not the case.
like,
It's a very
in the
traditional
wrestling,
arts community. Wrestling is extremely important.
At the Invitational, they always say, if you're an alumni, previously Allen wrestler, stand up, and like the entire crowd stands up.
Yes, it's very important to the culture of this community, and so is band and the arts.
Right.
That's traditionally what Allen is. Where I went, I went to Poland, and it was wrestling didn't even exist up until maybe like 10 or 15 years ago. It wasn't part of the community, but band used to have. When I was in high school, the band had 330 people in it. Okay, and then football is extremely important. Basketball is extremely important. That's the winter sport. So like their booster programs traditionally been well ingrained and helped financially. So baseball here, I don't think that they have necessarily that support. But did Ms. Faranack talk at all about how that they, even though it's not school affiliated in terms of where the money's coming from, did she talk about how the Booster Club was set up and how they went from a bunch of separate booster clubs to trying to bring everything under one umbrella?
No, she did not.
No, that'd be a good question for her because one, I wasn't part of that. I just know that they went through that process a couple years ago, and I know that what was important to her, because Ms. Faranack's very concerned with equity, is they wanted, it used to be so like you had your football backers and you had your band boosters and you had your wrestling or whatever the wrestling one was called, and that creates a little inequity because you feel like you're always fundraising against each other, and there's inequity naturally in that. So that's why all the banquets are all one. That's where all one came from. It was not a school thing. It was a booster thing at first to try to get everybody together so that everybody's supporting everything to help everybody.
Didn't that start in the football program our sophomore year? I thought like Anthony Shiraki's mom started that.
That I don't know. But yeah, it's been about 3-4 years. And so when you go to a banquet now, it's everybody's represented instead of like, well, football banquet's going to have it over at Leo's and it's going to be the big giant ordeal, and then everybody else is fending for themselves and stuff like that. So really, so that people aren't necessarily always pitted against each other. Plus, it helps with, so like if band's doing a fundraiser, they communicate with each other, so it's not the same fundraiser as wrestling.
Right.
So that you're not actually competing against each other. So I know that was important to Ms. Farinack and the Booster Club, was to help in that manner, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the money coming from the school. It does obviously indirectly very, very much impact the programs from that perspective, and that was one of the ways they tried to help that situation. So
Okay.
she could bring clarity to that though, because obviously she kind of was part of that process.
Right.
So
we've spoken with the student body, and they're like, not the whole student body, we're still going to do our survey.
sampling.
Hopefully tomorrow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, during homeroom.
Like finishing it tonight and then having it sent out tomorrow.
Okay.
But
You were the group that asked me to send something.
Yes.
You wanted me, yeah, okay, fine, that's good.
And
Just
then-
juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it was like Mr. Jacomi. It started off as like a couple questions, and then it skyrocketed into just a conversation.
Yeah, sure.
And so he believes that the necessities like uniforms and stuff like that should be school
Equipment.
paid for, but like the extra stuff should be like boosters and like out of your own money. So like for instance, to play football, you need all the like the helmet, shoulder pads, pants, cleats, and everything.
Necessities, yes.
Right. But if you want the fancy Under Armour pants, you have to go get them yourself. You have to use the school ones.
Well, see, that's where you get into like rules and stuff too. You know, you have to have like the same uniforms, and you know, like even in high school when you're running track, if you're running a relay with 4 people, your 4 people have to be dressed the same. You know that? There's all these little nuances and rules. So where you get to college and one guy running the first leg of a 4x1 can be in like spandex, head to toe, long sleeves, long pants. The other one can be wearing like the baggy little shorts that like distance runners wear. And then the next guy could be wearing like the spandex that cut off like right here and just like a wrestling singlet type of thing. Where in high school it's like even if everybody,
Right.
it's like how they operate the National Football League. They're very specific about dress being uniform across, not uniform, but you know.
Did you know it's a team point in wrestling if you shake a guy's hand with your left hand?
Oh yeah.
It's considered disrespectful.
Yeah, so there's all those little rules and nuances, and that applies to equipment and uniforms also. You know, like in football, you can't wear a shield unless it's clear. And there's a good purpose. It's because if somebody gets a concussion or something, you got to see their eyes, or if somebody has a head injury, you can't take their helmet off until you can't take their helmet off. That's why even if there's a serious head or neck injury or spinal injury or anything like that, the helmet doesn't come off. First thing they do is they take a face mask off, because they can unscrew that without moving your head or anything, and keep you stabilized, and they'll take somebody off on a stretcher with the helmet still on. But that's why you can't have a shield on your face mask that's not clear, because you can't see somebody's eyes and you need to see it. So there's all those little nuances and rules and things like that. So one of the problems you get into is you're playing like a sport and say, okay, you got to get this yourself. Team's not getting any of that. Then you start getting parents who, well, I bought this gray shield for my kid's face mask. Well, you wasted your money. Can't use it. So sometimes things are taken over to be across the board for everybody to make sure that you're sticking to a rule, and also to the parents aren't wasting their own money, because there's so many rules and nuances that you end up with upset people if they spend money on things that they. So all right. So what else, Mr. Tracomi, have to say?
He talked about the certification that coaches need to get in order to coach, and the very little compensation for that.
Okay. Does that tie into your topic at all? I guess
I mean,
It-
kind of.
yeah,
Not really. It's more of like the other way. It's like you can talk about the students, or you can talk about the
you know, I mean, the bottom line is when it comes to high school, like interscholastic stuff, it's I coached for a very, very long time. You don't do it for the money. You're not. I mean, the amount, especially some sports, the amount of money that you make, if you broke it down per hour, you could go flip burgers at a fast food
Mr. Eric
restaurant and make more money.
did the math for wrestling based off their split contracts,
Yeah.
and based off the amount of hours driving into the hotels and everything. 12 cents an hour.
Yeah, good. That's like I did my math one time for coaching football because the amount of hours you put in, it was like 6 cents an hour. So you don't do it for that. You do it for kids. Period.
Right.
That's just the way it is. You're literally doing it for kids, and why do people keep doing it? Well, because they like kids.
Right.
They love the sport. They like the activity. They love working with kids. That's why people keep coming back for more, because it's not about the money. And obviously, keep in mind too is Howland's coaches are paid well compared to a lot of other schools. So put that in perspective. So I made, when I compared to when I lived in Florida and I coached in Florida, I made about 35% of what I made here in Ohio for coaching. You know, like I get paid like, you know, here our football coach, it's, you know, if you're like an assistant football coach or a head, you make, I don't know, it depends on there's a percentage. You know, like, do you guys know how the coaching pay works or anything? Did Ms. Farnack talk anything about that?
No.
So like the way it works is you have a base teacher salary, which is like a first year teacher who has no other extra training or anything like that, what you would get hired in at as a teacher. So then every coaching contract or activities contract is a percentage of that base, okay? And obviously some are worth a higher percentage or more money because they're more involved. Like football coach takes a lot more time and effort, and you have a lot more players and a lot more hands involved than being like the golf coach. Doesn't mean it's more important, it's just, it's a lot more effort and time. Instead of having 9 golfers, you have 50 football players and a lot more parents, and you drive revenue, so you get paid a little more. Band even gets paid more than a football coach because they even have a bigger operation to run. That's how that works. But yeah, you definitely don't do it for the money, that's for sure. So, do it for kids.
So our first general question was like, from the perspectives of you being the principal and hearing the students in the hallways and hearing people coming to you for things like this, do you think that the students believe that that the sports are unequal in the way that they are funded?
I think it's natural for every school in America for kids to always feel one way or the other on a topic like that. Absolutely. Until they hear rationale, which is all they really usually want. You know, I think our district does a good job with, especially since Ms. Farnack took over, especially with how they rearrange boosters and things like that. And one of our messages and one of the things I do make an emphasis of is, like, we want to make everybody feel that they got a hand in this. You know, everybody's important. Every sport is important. Every activity is important. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. It's, are you doing things the right way? Are you trying your best? Are you a good representation of the school and community? Everybody's important. So, you know, traditionally what some principals do is they go to every football game and every basketball game because that's where the most people are. It's the most public. I don't do that. One is I can't be at everything. That's for darn sure. So, but like what we have set up as principals is we try to stagger who's at what. So it's never like all of us are at this or all of us are at that. And I try to go to at least like 2 or 3 things a week and make sure it's always different. So I go to a bowling match. Like one week I'll go to a bowling match, I'll go to a wrestling tournament on the weekend, and I might go to one basketball game. Then the next week I might go to the speech and debate tournament, and then I might go to the swim meet on the weekend, and I might go to a girls basketball game. It's literally like you're always trying to just show everybody that they're important. That's like what we do as administrators, is show face, tell people you appreciate what they're doing and the effort they're putting in. So obviously if this is what happens. There's a swim meet, a wrestling tournament, and a basketball game, and a speech and debate tournament all on the same day. You've seen the activities calendar, it's public. You look, there's like 4, 5, 6 things going on a day. Well, you can't go to everything every day. So you have to make sure you're equitable in terms of showing kids you care. So that's one of the things we try to do. Now that being said, that does help the student perspective and the parents. It really does, because like when I walk into a bowling match in Struthers, and those kids don't get to see, there's no other principals there. They don't get to see principals very often. So those parents appreciate this, that you took that time to go watch them. Now, I'm not at every bowling match, I'll go to two, 3, or 4 bowling matches. Go watch them. You know, like I'll go walk on the golf course in the fall. Go walking out, go watch kids golf a couple holes, say hi, talk to people, tell kids are doing a great job. That's what helps. From my perspective and my role with your question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then, do you personally believe, now this is from your own perspective, not from the perspective of what you're surrounded with, would it be, do you think that they're funded correctly?
Yeah, I do.
You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because like I said, especially when you look at the large picture of a budget, you know, traditionally in a school district, they say like 2-3% of your entire budget is spent on athletics. I know that's hard for people like or activities.
It's a big budget.
You know, people 2 or 3. That's it. 2 or 3%. Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, out of the entire budget in a place like Howland, 75-80% is spent on operating, which operating is your employees' salaries and benefits and your bills, electric, water, gas. Like 80% of, let's just use a standard number that's close to what our budget is as a district to operate. Like 80% of $30 million goes towards those types of things, you know. You know, that's like when we had that levy last year that we had to pass. It's an emergency operating levy. Now, emergency doesn't mean it's an emergency. It's a stupid name for how the state calls it, but all that means is that it's an amount of money that has to last a certain time. There's an end to it, okay? That's all that means is it's either a 5-year or a 10-year, and once that time period ends, that levy's gone, and you have to get a new one. You have to go to the polls and put that out to your public. So, but that money that was levied last year was literally just to be able to keep the doors open and operate at the same capacity without having to reduce staffing, you know, lose teachers or lose employees.
Weren't they discussing cutting on these programs before it passed?
Well, sometimes things like that are brought up to the public as possibilities that may have to occur, that you do have to, like I know where I live in Poland, and I mean I know that like yesterday just on the news they said they're going to close another building, and just like how we're closing North Road, and you always have to something's got to give. You got to save money somewhere. There's always ways to do it with cutting, but you never want to cut stuff for kids, you know. So, but in this district, and same thing in Poland, we've cut and everything that we could cut that doesn't impact kids. And I think what the message was to the public is there's not much left room to cut without cutting curriculum, stuff that impacts kids, and we don't want to do that. So, like you close North Road, and it'll save you several $100,000 a year just in you don't heat the building and have to pay bills. But there's only so much you can cut. So, am I getting to your question? Now we're going backwards. So read the question again just to make sure.
Do you believe personally that they're funded correctly?
I do, because it's such a small portion, and it can't be like across the board equal. It can't, because you have a game that has you can go to a Niles football game in town, you get 5,000 people there, and you have a $10,000 game. Okay, you're never gonna have a bowling match that earns more than $100, let alone $10,000. And there has to be, you know, proportion spent. It has to be proportional. Now that being said, I've been to a place where it was much more equitable in terms of the setup, not within the. Now keep in mind, I was in Florida. In Florida, their school districts are different. Like if this were Florida, this would be the Trumbull County School District, and you could go to any high school in the county as long as you could transfer any high school in the county. Okay, so as long as you essentially it's like all open enrolled, and if you move somewhere, you could very easily see a kid maybe go to 2-3 high schools within 4 years, because they might just move apartments or condos or something like that. Now, because the whole district was a county, it wasn't like a township or like how ours is. So they obviously have county rules. So this would be like if Trumbull County said, okay, all the football teams get this and have to do this. All the bowling teams get this and have to do this. All the basketball teams get this and have to follow these rules. All those were like across the county. So the problem with creating such equity like that is, see, when you have a setup like that, you remove the power of a booster program. So we're working on things here that come from working with your community. Schools are treated like businesses now instead of just completely just worrying about the general fund paying for stuff or a booster club paying for stuff. Schools run like a business now. So, you know, we're working on trying to get a video scoreboard for there in the gym. Well, we're not paying for it. The taxpayers aren't paying for it. The businesses are paying for it, because what do businesses do?
Advertise.
They advertise. Well, if you have we have 70,000 people coming through the football gates and the basketball gym, between basketball and wrestling and volleyball and football and soccer and all those things. Well, people want access to put their name in front of 70,000 people. So they throw money at you. They really do. So, but people haven't thought of schools like a business up until really recently. But you know, going back to the Florida thing, is because of the way that county was set up, and so we did that and got a video board out here and here, we wouldn't be allowed to go seek money from businesses and do that, because you can't do it unless the other 15 high schools in the county can do it too. You can't go get turf. There wasn't no turf, it's all grass. Why? Because if you're going to do it, the other 15 teams, the other 15 schools for soccer and football, they need to be able to do it. So it's almost like this socialist perspective where it's everything has to be equal, and what it does is actually hurts some communities that would have more support than others. Whereas, you know, Howland's got strong support. It's not held against us that, you know, we have strong support, but maybe our support's stronger than Matthews or something like that. It's not held against us because, you know, whatever we do, it doesn't matter what the community next to us does. So, don't know if that helps or not, but.
What changes do you think should be made in general, if any?
I think the changes that have just occurred within the last couple of years, like how they changed. I'll be done in a minute, Jenna, if you need some.
I just have a future release form for you.
What's that?
A future release.
I'll bring it in here. I'll just sign it if that's all you need. So the changes that have been ongoing. When are you leaving?
Friday.
Cool. Excited? All right. Let me know how it goes.
Okay.
Glad to see you. Good luck to you. The changes that have been ongoing, I think that were made with boosters were important. Okay, and again, that has nothing to do with the school funding portion. But that also, again, is make sure that we're all working together and not competing against each other. You never want to promote band to put down wrestling, or promote wrestling to put down basketball. You never want to get into that, because that doesn't help kids. So I think that's an important change that's been ongoing, and it's still not perfect, but it's really because we have that same voice and attitude that it's really been productive and helpful, and we're starting to see some of the rewards from that. Now the removal of pay to participate, which is something that ties into school funding, I think was essential. And you know, our current administration did not put that in place, but that's one of those things where, like, oh, if we don't pass a levy, we're going to have to do this. But again, that was one of those decisions where it was made that does hurt kids and hurts families, because you're asking for money. And again, as I know I've told you guys this, is that's a drop in the bucket. That amount of money you get from that is nothing. So to be able to pass this levy,
that was more for the individual families, because it hurt the families a lot more than it helps.
well, think about this. So let's say you got 3 kids in the high school band. They just band alone. Think about how much money that is, just for one family, just for one activity. And then on top of all the other things you have to do for band, the other things you have to pay for, go to band camp, and you want to go to Florida this year, and all these other things. I mean, that money just starts, and it really puts a hurting on. And then what do kids do? Their families do? They're like, well, then you can't do this, or you know, maybe you don't. Maybe is band worth it? They start questioning things like that. So removal of that, again, is a recent change. I mean, it hasn't even happened yet. It's approved to happen for next year. It hasn't happened this year. That's an important change. So I do think that some of the changes that have already been going on that are in place, and then especially some of the things I've talked about in terms of us taking more of a business model of an approach, because we sit right smack dab in the middle of a business corridor with 46 and all these commercial districts around here, is to go, okay, our kids need help. We can provide a lot of people that you could advertise to. You know, you've been to Boardman, right? You've been to Boardman. You see Boardman's like football field and track and everything. There's, you know, well, why is Boardman able to do that?
They have a lot higher.
They sit right in the middle of all those car dealerships and hospitals, and all those people want to advertise. Like their press box alone, Kia, Toyota, Taylor Kia of Boardman. They paid like $125,000 or $150,000 for that press box, just so that their name's lit up on the press box, and it's lit up 24/7. When you're driving down Market Street in Boardman, past that high school, and it's Toyota, you know. But $150,000 for a car dealership for something that's going to be there, and they don't pay like, here's $150,000. It's like $150,000 over 8 years or over 10 years. It's a contract, so it's paid annually. But that's a drop in the bucket for them and their budget for what they pay on advertising, and it's valuable to them. So having that business approach as well to help your programs, and not just always be going to the parents or your taxpayer for things that are very important. So those things are already going on. They're just recent things within the last couple of years. But I completely agree that as you'll see a lot of changes, even just this school year alone, this coming school year alone, from some of those, you know, the benefits of some of those changes. So.
Now, what do you believe that, like, what could you change for the future, like, that hasn't been put in place yet?
Well, I mean,
what, like,
using those models.
Like, what funding changes do you believe, like, now you looked at the pay to play that's happening next year.
Yeah.
What do you see beyond that?
Well, I mean, I don't see, like, those three, using those three principles, you'll see a lot of changes. And again, it's like it says, I don't deal with funding for activities other than band, because it's the only co-curricular thing. It's the only thing that crosses and lives in both worlds. Okay, so that's probably better misfiring that question, other than the fact that, you know, do I assist with all these things that we're talking about in terms of, so how do I, so the removal of pay to participate, well, that makes that conversation a lot easier when I'm walking around the hallways and go, you know, I see something in you. Why don't you try doing this? Why don't you see like a kid walking down the hallway and you know that you've seen him play basketball, and, you know, why don't you go high jump? Well, now that you don't have to pay $150 just to go high jump, why not go on the track team after school and just go high jump? Okay, it's easier to recruit your hallways and get kids involved in activities. Okay, that's important to me, is because it's easier to have those conversations, because we want kids involved in as much stuff, because, you know, research shows the more things kids are involved in, the more things students are involved in, the higher their grades are, the less likely they're going to fall into any sort of bad habits or anything like that, the more likely they're going to pursue, you know, further their education. All those types of things are proven. And then and I'm also involved, you know, highly involved in some of our marketing and going to these businesses and things like that. So, I mean, really, all these things, you'll see a ripple effect on kids. You know, they're not like fast changes, but you'll start seeing a lot of positive things over the next several months. So, I mean, sticking to those three things, there's a lot of stuff that can come from them. There's nothing else necessarily, you know, strategy-wise that I'd say. But what comes from, you know, sticking to those principles, what happens through good conversation or discourse is you get ideas of how to, oh, maybe we should do this, or maybe we should do that. That stuff comes up. So, you know, for instance, you know, I talk about like the buildings, is we have a lot of, you know, there's things start painting outside. You guys see that? They started painting outside of the building the other day, and obviously we have the air conditioning going in, and we have all these changes that are going on within the building to try to improve. You know, we added new security cameras this year. Like, all of those things stemmed from some conversation, and really what the conversation always starts with is, what's the best what's the best decision for kids? Okay, why we get new security cameras? Well, because we were able to go out and secure the grant money to do so, and our security cameras are old, there weren't enough of them, so it's what's best for kids. Well, to have more, so you can help keep kids safer. Same thing with the air conditioning. It's the we have an old building, the temperature does this, and it's, but if we were able to secure that funding to do that, and that's not from that levy, by the way.
Right.
Remember, that's operating. These are permanent improvements, which is money that's levied differently and already been waiting to be used. All the lights been changed. Why? Well, these use half the electricity. We need the electricity to run the air conditioning, so you have to change the lights. But also, using half the electricity is a good thing.
Save money.
And what's the best? And again, it comes back to what's the best choice for students. There's always something. These flicker. There's like a flicker rate is what they call these. These are much more natural to the eye. They don't flicker. They don't cause like eye problems, and they don't. They like we have kids who, like that wears on you. You notice that like light that's not natural wears on you, especially if you're trying to study and focus and things like that. There's always fringe benefits, but the choices always come down to how do we help kids. So that's the main thing. So I can't predict the future or what will come up, but sticking to those principles, lots of good stuff comes up. What else? Anything else? You gonna remember all that?
Well, we recorded it, so we're gonna go through it. Yeah.
Anything else you need from me?
Yep.
Let me know how it goes too. If you got any more questions, let me know. Okay, guys?
Do you want me to email you once we have the form
you
set
can
up?
You can email me the form. I'll review it, and if I have any suggestions, I'll let you know, and then we can get it sent out. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for coming in.